This is NHTV2, North Haven Government Television, a service of North Haven Community Television. The following program is brought to you through the support of the town of North Haven.
I'd like to call our March 20th meeting to order. We have a long agenda tonight. First item of business, minutes from our meeting of February 20th. Everyone's had a chance to review it. Questions or comments?
I'd like to make a motion to accept them.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. We really have no old business other than budget, which is our item 4, so moving on to reports.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I just have a really brief request here, and that is at some point in the meeting prior to the resolution that we read for the budget and voting on that, could there be a possible moment for additional input from the public prior to our vote tonight? It is
That
something
is done at the town meeting.
Yeah, that is true.
So I'd rather not change our procedures and protocol. I mean, they can comment afterwards, and they can comment, of course, again at the town meeting, and then when we come back, we can make adjustments from there.
I had a request from someone out there in the public that might want but I just, I was carrying that forward.
No problem. I think it's better to do it in that venue because we have all the appropriate people there, from the business manager, the Board of Ed.
Yes.
And everyone has their full set of documents.
Yes. No, I do understand. My other request regarding the agenda is just before we talk about the budget, where myself and Mr. Frieda can report on the health insurance workshop findings this year. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we can do that as part of finalizing the budget because it is one of the line items in there. Yes.
Okay.
Right. We'll do it with 4.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Once we start item 4, we'll do it.
Very good. Thanks.
Expenditure reports. Any questions? Comments?
I have one comment. It's page 9, and it has to do with the police. I understand the police moved across the street and they're in the Park and Rec. Am I correct on that?
The dispatchers are.
Dispatchers are, they're actually operating out of another building.
Yeah, building across the street from the high school.
You know, they have those office buildings.
So, because I was wondering how we were getting electricity, gas, and heat charges when I thought they were in the across the street.
Just dispatch moved there because the trunk line for 911 and all the communications was there. The rest of the department, detectives and such, across from the high school.
Right.
Okay, so that's
They're renting space over there.
Yes, yeah.
There's probably
Because it works better to get them out of here so they can do the work.
Oh, I understand that.
Yeah.
I thought they were just across the street, and I was wondering why we were being charged for utilities. Okay.
Anyone else on expenditures?
On page 6, under personnel policy expenses, what is the explanation for the reserve accrued benefits
That's
entry?
the amount we pay for people that are have announced their retirement to pay out for their accrued vacation and sick time. And we never know what it is, so we try to take a 3-year average of it for the budget, because some years it's higher or much higher if a lot of people leave, and other years it's less.
Thank you.
And one last comment, page 11, transfer station?
Yeah.
Utilities. What exactly are we speaking of here?
Is that the trailer? You're talking about the item that's...
Yeah, because I
15,000?
happened to look into that. That was for
Oh, well, yeah.
facilities over there, yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought you were thinking.
It might have been more than one.
All right, okay, thanks.
Anything else on expenditures?
That's it.
Revenue?
On the revenue side, I just wanted to ask the finance director a general question about whether there's any concerns regarding revenue from the state. What's still in the pipeline? What do you expect? What might you be worried about?
Well, as always, I'm worried about all of it because you never know what's coming and what's not, and they could cut it. But other than that, it's trending based on what we normally get paid and when we normally get paid.
Anything else on expenditure special funds? And we do not have anything from the Board of Ed. If there's no other questions, have a motion to accept the reports as presented.
Make a motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Frieda, you had a comment before we
Yeah,
started?
I wanted to mention to the audience here and to those watching on TV that we're pleased to announce there'll be no tax increase this year. What you'll see tonight is maintaining of the existing mill rate. The town will be fulfilling all its obligations in terms of pension contributions. What we'll see here, and I'll outline it a little bit more in detail in the April hearing, as part of this no tax increase budget, is the fact that the town is doing very well right now. We have a 4.9% spending increase, but approximately 56% of that is the debt service that has grown. And I wanted everyone to know, because it's a very important point, that Ed and I have been planning for this for several years, knowing that when you bond and borrow to improve the town, and what we've done is we've renovated 4 new firehouses. We've paved 10 miles worth of roadways a year at $2 million cost. We have purchased open space to protect the integrity of some of the neighborhoods. We have built a new middle school that you see down over on Elm Street, and we're in the process of finalizing our police department, which is soon to open in July. So Ed and I, as we've been bonding for projects, and I'm going to repeat this at the town hearing in April, that when we go out to bond, because we are AAA rated, the private equity companies or banks who bid on our municipal bonds pay a premium. So we've been stockpiling the premiums away for years. So with this budget, although we go from 6.6 million to 9.4 million, a 2.8 million increase on the debt side to satisfy the obligations to pay for all the improvements we're doing in the town, we have been putting money aside and will be offsetting that 2.8 million with some of the accruals that we have in the debt reserve fund that we memorialized here with the Board of Finance. Part of the growth of the town is about $2,300,000 on top line revenue growth through the economic development that we have in town. I've said it before and I'll say it again, that the top line revenue will continue to grow. I can say that with full certainty because I'm involved with every single project personally. So next year we'll see additional grand list growth. So we're pleased to present this no tax increase budget. We, myself in particular, at the April meeting will take you through it in greater detail. And now I'll turn it over to the Board of Finance to go through some of the line by lines.
Thanks, Michael. Michael, do you want to at least go through the adjustments before we talk about medical?
Yes, yeah, but we could just
Because it is part of it.
Yeah, yeah, certainly. We could just speak first about the debt service, just to parlay off of the first selectman there. It's very fortunate that we do have the proceeds from the past premiums and that we can apply them. 2.6 or 2.8 million in debt service expansion or additional funds is a little more than a lot of us expected. I mean, we do know about the growth, and we know about all the bonding we're doing, we know about the construction projects, and we know all the good things that bonding brings us. I wasn't certain whether more items or issues from the past were being paid off in order to accommodate the new bonds, issuances.
Well,
that we-
in reality, I think a lot of it had to do with the plan that Michael had with the,
Ed can comment too. Ed?
Right.
Yeah, but so I'm asking more or less, what are the sources of the new bonding requirements? Is it just the middle school, or is the police station coming on board in the
Well,
next
it's a
fiscal year?
combination of a lot of things. You know, the principal doesn't always stay flat. Sometimes it's been put off, so it'll include the fire stations, the police station, and the middle school. And debt for the last 2 years. 2 years ago it was around 9.3. This year it's 9.2. But for the past 3 years, we've used $5 million in funds from the middle school capital project and $400,000 from the police station to pay that debt. So it's been paid out of those two capital projects. So take those numbers that I just talked about, and take off 5.4 for the past couple of years, and that's outside the general fund budget. That was paid elsewhere. So now this year, what you'll see is that we're taking the bond premiums, putting them in the debt service fund, and paying $1.4 million out of that. And also in the general fund, we've had debt reserve funds that are restricted funds that are in the general fund that have accumulated for the past probably 15 years.
And let me also add.
Yeah, but no, so you're saying then that the way that it's been a little confusing for us in terms of the debt structure, because there's so many projects that have been going on at the same time.
Right.
It's hard to keep track of, and you know, even with the CAFR report that I looked at,
it is listed in the CAFR.
It is, but it's hard to see how all the changes are taking effect and what the effect will be in the next fiscal year, say.
Right.
You know, how the trends are going. And so, okay, it's understandable there that through the initial year or two of some of these projects, some of the funds were used to actually lower our debt expense line, and now we're running out of those options or those alternatives, and all of the debt that we will have to pay on a continuing basis for the next 2 years is all coming as a single expense item.
Well, we'll have additional offsets in the next fiscal year. Ed and I were working on that. And I'm also planning out 10 years here. So I know what's going to happen 10 years from now. And we're going to be in even better shape 10 years from now. So anybody who suggests that we're spending out of control, that's not the case, because we're spending to improve the town. We could have not put a new middle school in play, which would have been condemned. It was on the verge of being condemned by NEASC. We could have ignored the police department,
Right.
which is a hazard for our policemen.
Yeah, no, I don't think anyone really is disagreeing with what we did. But the public should know the impact of the decisions that they've made in the past, so they might be educated about future choices that we have to make as well.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point, Michael, because what I've said before ties into your point, is that when you see a new middle school, that doesn't mean it's paid for. It means that we're kind of just beginning to pay for it. But we have carefully calibrated the debt in subsequent years here. And I know there's going to be top-line revenue growth. If we take the debt portion out of the budget, the 4.9%, about 56% of that 4.9% is for debt. And we're presenting something that, by the way, every municipality wishes they could do, including the surrounding municipalities. We're offsetting the increment by prudent financial practices from putting these monies aside. So we only spend to improve the town. We don't spend to plug a pension obligation debt or a discrepancy between revenue and expenses. We deal with this every day, Ed and I, and this Board of Finance is very skilled also financially. We're in great shape right now, and this budget reflects it with a no tax increase.
Right.
It is well planned out.
I know, but again, when we have to explain how the grand list can grow by what it is, what you had it increased by last year, and then some people wonder, well, maybe there should even be a tax decrease. Or I'm not advocating for that at the moment, but I'm just saying that, you know, they're going to wonder why there is how did the town's spending grow by the I think 4.6% or whatever it did this year? And there are answers for it, because certainly the fire department requires their resources, and the education department does too, and there are valid reasons. But one of the reasons that's unusual and atypical is that with that 1.4 million that's being used out of that special account, our debt service payment in the next fiscal year is 36% higher than it was in last fiscal year. So we're going from 6.9 to 9 million. Now only 7.6 million is coming out of this budget, because the other 1.4 is being paid for by the special funds. But again, this is something that each of us on the Board of Finance is going to have to answer to people who come up to us and say, what's going on with the debt?
Mike, the simple answer is this, that anyone knows that at some point you got to start paying the principal plus the interest. Okay, that's one portion of it. The other thing is, most construction loans have an interest reserve, which is what Ed was saying a minute ago. That when the buildings are being built, the interest is in the budget, which is what Ed was referring to a minute ago. So we didn't come out of operations. It's in the construction budget, which is typical with most construction projects. So now we have to pay the interest and the principal on these projects that we didn't have to pay in the past.
Well, that's right. So my question to Ed was, what were the reasons? Is the police station coming online in terms of our bonding responsibilities this year, or is that going to be pushed? Is that in fiscal year 2021?
Like, we've already taken out money on the police station. Right now, I think there's about 18 million outstanding on it, because we have to have money to pay the bills as they come due. And last year, the total debt was around 9.3. This year, it's around 9.2.
But I guess the question is that Mike said the police station comes online July 1, right? So at that point, the project's done. Don't we have to pay the interest on that out of the budget then? And
we've already been paying some already.
Yeah. I know, but on July 1, going forward to the next fiscal year.
We'll be.
So this is the effect of the police station and the middle school at the same time.
Right, because I won't have the money set aside in that capital project anymore. I used up all the 5 million, and the 400,000 will be used up by the end of this fiscal year.
Okay. So the other question I had is that those debt service funds, are there any still remaining that you can utilize in the following fiscal year?
Yeah, I haven't finished going through them all, but there's more available. Plus, there'll be a new bond issuance this November.
Yeah. So let me explain that, because that's a great point. Ed makes a great point. So there's going to be a significant amount we're going to apply next year in the debt reserve fund. And as we continue to bond, let's say for paving roads, we accumulate premiums that will stockpile again and offset and mitigate future debt. So we've got this really planned out, and we have it planned out to the T, year by year. So let me repeat that. Well, if we go out to bond for road paving, we accumulate premiums. If there's any balance on the bonds for PD, we accumulate premiums. Those get stockpiled, and they'll get rolled back over. So as Ed pointed out, we'll have a significant amount. He's still working on the numbers, and next year we'll have another offset.
Okay. I mean, this discussion I'm engaging in right now is for clarity purposes, to be clear amongst ourselves and amongst the public, well, exactly what's going on.
They're long-term debts, they're long-term bonds. It's something that the finance director and our first selectman have looked at a long-term solutional plan to.
And we're still under-leveraged as a municipality.
Oh, yeah.
We're very under-leveraged.
Of course, yeah.
So.
Right. Well, I'll be looking forward to that beautiful slide during the PowerPoint presentation soon.
Okay.
If we can go through the changes. And I made some other changes.
Ken, I have a couple questions on the staffing budget. When would we do that?
All right, can we let's go through this so you know what this is, and then you can ask what you have in staffing.
Okay.
You've seen already the changes that came through. If you look in the red at the bottom of your page, when we caucused through it one more time, we went back and we decided to add back in some of the IT items. Half the PCs, the solid states, and the 21 domain.
Good.
So we had to offset that. So we eliminated the SUV for fire, the ballistic vest, and we reduced $12,000 506 off the generator. Now, the other thing that has to be done, and Superintendent of Schools is aware of it, we've asked them when they represent their budget to us to include a line item for $159,014. Their total dollar amount, the $54 million, isn't going to change at 2.9%, but they're going to have a line item for the 159 because if state does hit us for it, it's coming from the Board of Ed's budget.
Oh, for the
pension.
teacher's pension.
Teacher's
Okay,
pensions.
teacher pension obligation.
And those
Yeah, I
are
did.
pretty much the changes. The dollars zero out, so the overall numbers in the current budget that you have with you is the same. We just shifted a few dollars around. Now, Pat, you said you had a question on personnel?
A couple of questions.
Sure.
Page 40, I was looking at the salary requests for the Selectman's office, for the administrative assistant and the administrative clerk. One increase is 8% and the other one is 18%. And is there a reason why they're so high?
Well, we gave the second and third selectmen.
Wait, you're talking about?
The
He's
selectmen.
talking about the, no.
Talking about the administrative salary.
The clerical.
I assume one's a step.
Well, the bottom line may show an
Yeah, one's a step as well.
Right.
The clerk, the administrative clerk, or the assistant?
They both have, there's both.
No, they both get raises, but one of them's a step, maybe the
They
assistant's a
follow the
step.
contracts.
Whatever their contract values were, that's right. So many years and there's a step.
Okay.
Do you know
But the
what-
other issue is also too, that the contract was out for 2 or 3 years.
Oh,
So
all right. That's-
we had to put in the catch-up because it's always been held in the contractual obligation line.
That's fine. Thank you.
And you had another one, Pat?
Yes, on page 41, under the assessor, I don't recall the assessor talking about adding a position.
Well,
Now,
we're-
did he take it out of, there were 2 senior clerks, now there's 1, and then an appraiser has been added, and there wasn't one before. Does that mean there was a swap out?
What happened, Pat and Ed can elaborate, is that we didn't add a position. We upgraded a position with a certain amount of dollars, and we saved about $25,000 by not having that outsourced, Ed, right?
Right, because they took out the consultant line for $30,000.
Right.
So we upgraded it, we bumped them up one step.
Okay.
So we actually saved money on that.
Right. And then the last question is on page 42, under fire. There is a senior clerk added, and I don't recall, when I went back through the budget packet for the fire department, I saw an entry or request for a fire marshal secretary at a higher salary. So what is the senior clerk position?
That's the position that's, it was part-time, made part of full-time, because Paul needed the assistance to go over the fire plans, the administrative part of it.
The permit fees
Yeah.
and such.
Well, is that considered the fire marshal secretary? I'm looking at
I mean, it's
his,
a clerical position. I don't know what the label to it is.
It's considered
That's the
a,
only new position there.
it's a clerical position for the deputy chiefs that has gone from part-time, as was stated, to full-time, to help handle the fire reviews and the plans that end up leading to revenue being generated.
so the amount that was listed in the budget packet of $45,027 is this position now that is at
Right, he
$36,500.
probably put the position in there with a dollar amount, but once we found out what the starting salary is, we put the.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, good point.
Thank you.
It's a good question, because Tim has a question a lot. When you look at the numbers we get from the departments, that's before Ed actually says, no, this is the real number.
Yes, and also the title of the job.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Anything else on the changes that were made? Michael, you had a question on
Well,
medical?
no, the changes in general, I just wanted to know if, again, if the finance director might, or someone else might want to go through them to see if they are going to be funded or taken care of in any alternative fashion. Not so much the 2 top lines here that have to do with the selectman and the treasurer, but the personal policy expenses are obviously that's something that we're not going to be short on, obviously. And after that, the police full-time, is that,
The dispatchers.
is that reflective of additional dispatchers? Because we had 2 in and we're putting 2 more in?
didn't have any initial budget.
We're adding 4.
He requested
He requested 4,
Four.
so that's 4 of them going in
half year. Half year,
going in January.
okay,
So it's full-time, half-year.
half year.
And the same thing with the fire personnel, that's 2 going in half year and making up the salary on the 2 that are in it. It's actually adding like 3 people. No, it's actually adding like 2 people, it's 3 people out of it, it's adding like salary for 2 people.
Not if it's only
Yeah, that
124,000.
doesn't sound right, because you're
No,
adding,
that's 2 people for half year, the other guys are already back there.
Yeah.
yeah, but one of them, aren't you short one? Oh, you factored them in already?
They're already-
They were already in, all right, they were already in the fire
Already got
department
the
budget.
number in, yeah.
You already put it there. So this is just the 2 for half a year.
Okay.
Community services?
Yeah, what's, did that cut have to do with a position or?
No, one person works 3 days a week full-time, plus there are 2 grants we get, one for BH Care and one for the YSB administrator. So that's about 30,000. The rest is reflect the person who's only working 3 days a week, not 5.
Okay.
If you look on the page on the community services, there's 2 negatives. That's because of the revenue we
Yeah.
That's a fund salary.
All right. Now, the street lighting, is that falling in line with our current spending this year? And it's good that some of those IT items got added back in. As far as the revaluation, is that,
It
do we
started
already have enough, or it's already fully funded?
Yeah, we have enough to cover it this time, yeah.
We do, okay. Okay, full maintenance, and you hate to see the senior bus taken out. Is that, again, is that?
We've already have some dollars in the
I've got
account.
40,000 set aside right now.
That's,
Yeah, is it only 40 we have in there?
Yeah.
If we need, we'll make it up in the next budget after. We've
Okay.
already set aside 40,000.
Yeah, that's all the only questions I had, obviously, questioning everything on the changes. Yes.
Pat, did you have any other questions?
No.
Anyone have any question on the budget that's being proposed?
Rich,
Sure,
we're going to change some things here, right?
I did.
Listen,
we just didn't tell you.
We just did.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I went through the items. The dollar amount doesn't change, so everything kind of stays the same. I do want to see by the town meeting that we need to get revised Board of Ed budget to include that. Unless someone has anything else.
Yeah, there's things, yeah.
Michael?
This budget reflects the decrements, right? The one that we got in the package.
Yes.
Yes.
But the 118.
Yeah, the 118. Right?
And all we did was just shift some dollars.
That's right.
Mike, you have something else?
Well, we never know if salaries in here are reflective of contracts being settled. And there are some other clerical items here, such as page, just say, 42, where 2 of the 3 individuals in the clerical and the police, their salaries are being increased 12 and 13%. And then over on land use, the following page, on page 43, 2 secretaries, their salaries are being increased 22%. So I didn't know if there's steps for clerical workers, but
There are steps for clerical.
it seems that these are a little high even for multi-year settlements.
Which ones?
There's 3 years, 7.5% right there, and a step could bump it up more.
Okay, so that we were 3 years in arrears on the on that contract.
Yeah, so these are the new figures after the contract settled.
whose contract is out right now? Anyone? 5 groups are still out?
So the following page, on page 44, when the 2 secretaries in total are being increased 18%. Is that 2 steps and 7.5%?
Mike, what department is that, please?
That's community services, page 44.
83 to 99.
No, Mike, remember I just spoke about the community service full-time personnel I had to cut?
Yeah.
It's too high, so we backed that down. It was factored in as a 5-day work week, they only work 3 days.
This one of the decrements is what he's
That's
saying.
one of the decrements you have for you.
Plus the 2 revenue items,
Okay.
that makes up that 54.
I guess. All right, I'm not sure. I'm not sure we're talking about the same thing, but, okay, all right, for now. Larger items here. Our pension contribution is actually going down, and that's always a concern. But does that have to do with?
That's a good thing.
That's a good thing.
That's a good thing.
Does that have to do with any change in assumptions?
No.
With regard to rate of return or anything else?
That's one of the best things that could happen. And the pension arc that goes down is a reflection of the actuaries giving us the number as a result of our reconfiguring the investment portfolios rising, going beyond the 7.5% in implied return.
Right.
So anytime
So it is a factor of the assumptions that the actuaries are working with.
it's a factor of
That wouldn't change the
it's not the assumptions.
That's not the
It's a factor of what the actuary tells us. So when your ARC payments go up, generally the pension funds, they're not returning well. When your ARC payment goes down based on the actuarial analysis, that means we've done a great job in terms of reinvesting, reconfiguring the portfolios, and that's what we've done.
All right. By the way, when I said concerning, I just meant if we were getting too much of an optimistic viewpoint, that might again be slightly unrealistic.
No, actually,
That's the concern I was having.
Right.
Of
No,
course,
no,
it's
no.
a good byproduct if all the figures are correct.
and the rating agencies love the fact that the pension, the levels that they're funded is growing because of the investment portfolio that we've spent a lot of time on.
That's great. All right. I'm going to go on to the next big item here. Oh, it's not that big. The Board of Ed. I just wanted to. Did we get a copy of the bus contract yet?
We got it last year. I actually have it, Mike, but they're in the 3rd year of the contract they had last year.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah, we had it last year.
Was there a new bus contract?
No,
No,
I think it's
the
like,
third year. Okay. So
I don't think they circulated to the board. The one I have is from last year. Yeah.
we'll make sure you get a copy of it.
yeah. Some information was sent to Tim regarding some special ed bus routes and costs.
Yeah, it was in the package.
It was in the package. Now, is that just a response from the Board of Ed, or is that something that came from the consultant?
No, when we had our meeting here, Mike, the question came up with the Board of Ed. So a couple days later, I followed up with the superintendent to give him some specific questions. It took a while because I'm told my email got lost in his spam somewhere, and then, as you know, he's no longer with the town, although they were working on it. Ed was good enough to follow up, and we got that document. Truthfully, I still have lots of questions on that. It's a little bit hard to follow the whole thing, but that's what we got.
And we're still trying to get
All right.
someone to look into it.
So this is great information that could go to the consultant, and we can work off this and at least have a point of discussion on this.
We are exploring it more.
It's a very good step one. Nice job, Tim.
Thank you.
You'd be hired if you had any money left. Yeah. So, but the Board of Ed, by the way, now you're asking them to pay the $159.
If the 159 gets assessed, it's going to be their responsibility to fund it.
To fund it somewhere out of their budget.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, that could lead then over into healthcare here. Our group did meet on March 13th, and we did get a report from our two agents, Brown and Brown, who were very helpful and insightful, and Blue, is it Blue Point? Not Blue Point. Blue, Brian.
Blueprint.
Luciani.
Blueprint.
Blueprint.
Brian
Yes,
Luciani.
that's it. Right. And the Blueprint was going to give us some more feedback on the town side to determine whether the projections that we got from Brown and Brown on the Board of Ed side, whether they could be applied or interpolated for the town side. Did we get anything further from them in terms of numbers?
Yes, we came in, we had estimated slightly over a 6% increase, and the renewal rate came in at 5.8%.
On the town side?
On the town side. So we actually, because we have calculated slightly over 6 versus the 5.8, the aggregate renewal dollars that they came forward with, we have about $60,000 or $80,000 more than that in our budget. So they came in at about 5.8. We had 6 calculated, so it was a good thing.
Was it 6? I thought that on our healthcare line, did we? Yeah, we went up 6 on ours. Board of Ed went up 7.15.
No, it's 4.3
No,
or something, right? Wasn't it? Right? That's the number Brown and Brown.
Well, Brown and Brown gave us, right. Brown gave us
Right.
a 4.3. A 4.3% increase. And this is after now the administrative costs went up approximately 6% from Anthem, I guess 7%. The medical claims line, we were told could be projected to go up 4.6% based on medical inflation. And but there were some other reductions, including a possible reduction on stop-loss coverage. And through that and through additional employee cost sharing, the Board of Ed increase will only be 4.3%. Now, right now in the Board of Ed budget, the increase is budgeted at 7.15%.
He's got it. What page is that? You have a page number?
There's no page numbers to the Board of Ed, but it's the first summary
Oh, here it is,
page.
yeah.
First
Right.
summary page on the Board of Ed.
Yep, thank you. I got it. Yeah, here it is.
There.
Right.
Which I think is a good idea, not only because it allows the Board of Ed to possibly shift some money over to the teachers' pension contribution that they might have to. Well, I guess if the state makes us pay that, we're alerting them it's the Board of Ed's responsibility. But also that we were a little short initially on some of the administrative startup costs for being self-insured. So this might be a way for the Board of Ed to pay their portion of that additional initial shortfall. If the finance department allocates those costs in that manner.
Well, I've always told them to take 1/12 of the budget and send it over to self-insurance fund, so it's all good.
4.3, but that number's, the
Yes.
number's 6860, I wrote that.
So overall, though,
My insurance is...
you know, at this point, for the 1 year point now or more in our self-insurance here, I think, as I mentioned to Mr. Frieda at the meeting, it's important for the public to know that we sat back, we discussed it, we evaluated it, and we do believe that we made the right move. And we saved the town hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions.
Actually, it's over $1 million we've saved, yes.
Yeah, so again, I hope that the Board of Ed agrees with this viewpoint, and And I certainly have seen the savings, and I'm very happy with the way it's progressing at the moment. So that's all I had to say on the regarding the Board of Ed and healthcare in general. So.
Okay, anyone else have any comments on the budget before we go to the resolutions? Hearing none?
Sir? Yes.
Yes, Michael.
The issue of what to do about the fire department has always been something that we have to consider in this budget and in budgets to come. And I know that it's uncertain what the revenue is going to be from the state year to year. And I understand it's a great concern that the amount of revenue that we're receiving now may not last into the future. But the public just wanted more or less an answer to whether we could go and agree with the chief's request for additional personnel in order to staff a second paramedic unit on all shifts and increase fire protection. And whether you agree with it or not, if we're going to go and add 2 people per year for the next 3 years, at a full cost to the town, I think that we should instead consider usage of the SAFER grant program in order to defray a lot of the initial cost of that. Now, I know that we didn't apply for it in the current fiscal year, but because this program gets renewed every single year, it's my feeling that we should not take on the 2 additional fire personnel in the next fiscal year, and we should wait and apply for the SAFER grant and then fulfill the chief's request.
So just so I understand, you believe we should take the 2 firemen out of this budget, but sometime next year, earlier than now, earlier than March, apply for the SAFER grant for how many firemen?
For the 6, for the additional 6.
You cannot make a decision on today's budget or try and lock the town or the board into a decision on a budget a year away from today. Even today, we're not sure what the state's giving us.
Even the chief and the fire commission agree with this, the 2 that we've put in. So.
Well, they're agreeing with the alternative that you gave them.
No, versus the
it's
SAFER.
Not versus
the SAFER grant. They like this approach versus the SAFER grant.
It gives them time to build up, but I don't see how the town can commit to something like that with the state of the state, where we don't know if, or right now it's projected our 160 is going to be 250 next year and 500 and then $1 million on the pensions.
So
by not using the SAFER grant though, for every firefighter that's hired, the town is losing out on the free money that this grant provides.
Yeah, but it's
You're
free.
going
It's
under the
free money,
assumption-
but it's delaying it. So if you get the SAFER grant for 6, and when the grant runs out, then we got to pay for 6, and that's going to be a big hit at
Well,
one
we may only
time.
have 4, and maybe 2 more years, or a year or 2, or even more before we can, depending on what's going on with the state, before we have the ability to fund more.
Well, that's why I'm trying to understand whether this board wants to accomplish the chief's goal.
This board wants to accomplish the fiscal year budget for 1920. Even when we had the workshops, Michael, I made it clear to the chief then, we could not commit to anything in the future because there's a lot of factors that can affect what this board ends up deciding.
If we decide to add 2 more men per year for the next 3 years, we have lost out on well over $1 million that the federal government would.
But what you're missing,
this town.
you're missing one thing, Michael. This plan, endorsed by the fire department, allows us to carefully calibrate the uncertainties in subsequent years in terms of state revenue. To Diane's point, if we were to do what you're suggesting, and in 3 years we had to pay full salaries and benefits for 6 firefighters after the SAFER grant went out, at that time, when we find out that the state revenue is cut, that's what Diane was referring to. That's the problem. This allows us a better way to calibrate the uncertainty for the future.
I think my view on this, I saw your math. I understand that in the short run, it's shorter. You're somewhat, well, I know you're bringing up a conversation, which is fine, but you're also somewhat assuming that we're all sold on 6, and I, for one, am not. As I think you know, I have some reservations about adding these 2, but I'm going to go along with it and vote for this budget when the time comes in a few minutes. So I think, at least just from my own personal perspective, that's a hurdle that I'd have to go before I went along with your suggestion.
And Michael, my concern is the fact that by adding additional personnel, I don't see a decrease in overtime. If anything, I see it growing. And I would hope, I'm not going to tell the chief how to staff his people and how to budget, but I would think that he would always have reservists in the firehouse when there was a fire taking place, so he could disperse the other firemen to other emergencies. My assumption is that I'm being told otherwise. I'm being told all of the firemen in the firehouse will go to one house, go to one fire. So we're back at ground zero here. If he allows all of these firemen to handle these emergencies, we're not accomplishing anything. We're just increasing the staff. If somebody gets sick, he's bringing guys in for OT. I don't see.
Yeah, right. He would want to maintain that 10-man level, so that there would be no decrease in overtime. There'd probably be an increase.
Yeah.
But again, I didn't know if this was important for the town to have the second paramedic group and better fire suppression on all shifts. Because, it's certainly something that Rich and I did not want. This is not our first option. Because, through our report and through our recommendations, we wanted some additional coverage during the day only. So, but if the problem still exists, I'm trying to find the most economical way to solve the problem on all shifts. And if we don't add the 6 more individuals, this problem will never be solved.
The other thing I guess I should say, Mike, is it's not 6. They got 2 this year, they're getting 2 next year. That's 4 already, right?
Yes.
So it's not an additional 6,
it's an additional 4.
It's an additional 4.
Right, it's an additional 4 in addition to the 4. Yes, correct. I'm just holding back on the 2 in order to get the benefit of the federal funds.
I'm not comfortable with that. I mean, it locks the town into, or it's making a commitment the town doesn't know if it can honor. There's so many things that can change in a year, and we know a lot of things are happening at the state level. There could be other needs that happen in town that supersede it for whatever reason.
Okay.
I understand your passion for it.
No, I'm not. I'm not passionate about staffing the fire department, 2 additional people on all shifts, 24 hours a day. But it's because of the union setup, because they've cornered us. They've defined what the solution is, and I still think the problem has to be solved. So no, I'm in agreement with you about what the first option would have been, but we don't control all the variables.
Well, variables can change.
So.
Did you have anything else?
I believe that's it. That's all.
Ed, am I correct? Can you give me the town budget number? The Board of Ed is 54. You got it. Never mind. I have 3 resolutions to read. Pat, you're good? Nothing else?
I think Mike and I need to speak about
Certainly.
5 minutes.
We'll take a 5-minute break.
Okay.
We are back. Our three resolutions. First one, resolve that the Board of Finance recommend to the public hearing a fiscal year 2019-2020 town government budget of $49,195,637. Can I have a motion to accept that resolution?
Make a
Make
motion.
that motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
I'm opposed.
Resolved that the Board of Finance recommends the public hearing fiscal year 2019-2020 Board of Education budget of $54,580 or 90? $90,313. Can I have a motion for that resolution?
I'll move it.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolved that a fiscal year 2019-2020 budget recommendation of $103,785,950 be presented to the public hearing to be held on Tuesday, April 2nd, 2019, with the Board of Education budget to be presented first, beginning at 7 p.m., followed by the town government to begin no later than 8 p.m., with general discussion to follow as may be warranted. Can I have a motion to approve that resolution?
I make that motion.
Second?
Second.
Sir, before we vote on that, since the motion's made, could there be
Yeah,
further
discussion? Yes.
Yes. Again, because this budget includes the question of how we're going to handle fire services down the road, I once again want to state that we've got a lot of people in town that are very concerned, including the Planning and Zoning Commission, who want to know from this board, are we willing to make a commitment for better fire and medical protection for every development that moves into town, not just in businesses, but in terms of additional housing of seniors, and housing of all sorts. And to not make that long-term commitment at this time is going to weigh on their minds and the votes that they take.
I would disagree because I've written a letter to the Planning and Zoning based on their request, outlining what we're doing. And it was supported by the chief, and that was in their packets. I'm sure it's been read by now. I've had some feedback from some of the P&Z members, and I offered more clarity to what they were looking for.
And in that letter, it stated?
The plan would be to add this coming year. We've already added to this past fiscal year. This coming fiscal year, we're adding 2 starting in January. We'll look at adding 2 per year till we reach the number that is asked for by the fire department, depending upon the state revenue. And I think any reasonable person would agree that that's a plausible way to explain it.
But as this development occurs, don't you agree that revenue is going to increase just on the basis of our tax base?
Yes.
But revenue could also decrease from the state.
Right.
So, it's all going to be based on revenue. I'm very confident, as I said many times, that we're going to continue to grow the top line revenue. We have a plan. It's endorsed by the Fire Commission, 2 per year, and I've written that letter to Planning and Zoning.
What if the public were able to be polled or asked at a referendum on whether we should add the additional fire personnel over the next 2 years with the usage of the SAFER grant?
The function of this board right now is to present a budget for fiscal year 1920, not a fiscal year budget for 2021 or 21-22, 22-23. The task in front of us is to present this budget right now. I don't see how this board in good conscience could make a commitment that with all the unknowns in the future, I mean, I would not be comfortable making that kind of commitment.
I mean, this is a very responsible budget, ladies and gentlemen, watching on TV. It's a no tax increase budget. We're looking to improve the town. We've got top line revenue growth, and we've got to very carefully analyze what the future will be in terms of state revenue.
Well, we asked the townspeople whether they wanted a paramedic service, and I think at this time we could ask them whether they want services to include a second paramedic unit and better fire protection, because using Hamden as our backup is not going to work very well.
The town has agreements with Hamden, Wallingford, North Branford, East Haven, as they have agreements with us for mutual aid when needed. If you want to focus on fire, Michael, we went through all those workshops. The majority of the calls are medical, and those calls are being answered. There is not fire suppression. Again, that's a topic beyond what our task is right now. Our task is to present a 1920 budget.
Okay, but it could also be to find out what the public sentiment is.
The public can make their
on
sentiment well known.
whether to spend extra tax dollars down the road for the additional 6 firefighters.
Yeah, but we can't do that now. We need to pass the budget.
It's not with this board. That's not the function of this board right now.
It could be. It could be to find out what perspective we are actually representing.
But it could change, Mike, so we have presented a budget to the town. They'll be able to speak at public comment. I don't think we could look beyond right now. We don't know what the future holds. I think that's for another time.
Yeah, the function of this board is to prepare and present a budget, not to prepare and present future budgets.
I don't know. I think long-term planning is just as important as next year. And
When you're a corporation, you do long-term planning, but when a lot of your revenue and things are controlled by the state, which is such an unknown, it's hard to do that right now. So I would say let's present the budget, and this is our task at hand.
Okay, we may continue this discussion in April, but for now you may call the question.
Fine. Any other discussion? I did read it.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah,
Sorry.
It was first and second.
Yes.
All in
Sorry.
favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I will oppose.
That finishes our budget.
Just for the record, you voted against the town for the Board of Ed, but not for the overall budget?
Correct.
Okay. Just out of curiosity.
Any board members
Well, I
have
get
any,
to vote again in April. I could change my mind.
You can.
any board members have any questions or comments? Hearing none, public comment. First row first.
Miri Weisenrelay, very happy about this budget, and I'm in support of the thought process of keeping in mind that revenue from the state is not a definite, and it could fluctuate, so I'm definitely in support of the 2 firefighters this year and then next year, and I don't think it would be wise to go for the SAFER grant. I understand the points in favor of that, but I think when you look at the big picture, I think it's a risk, and I don't think the town should take it. Okay. Regarding the planning and zoning letter, Mike, that you had mentioned, there was no March planning and zoning meeting because of the weather. It got canceled. So the next planning and zoning meeting will be April 1st. So I'm assuming safely that it will be read then. Let's see. Can you tell me if money was included in the budget for PPE replacement? The personal protection equipment.
There's $80,000 in the budget for the SCBA's every year because it was a lease type option. All the other equipment was replaced that was damaged or in the process of being damaged.
Oh, okay, so what was that figure? I'm sorry.
80,000.
80,000?
We put 80,000 every year for PPE on the SCBA's.
Okay, all right.
It's a long term, it was a lease. They were getting so many and they were paying it off over time.
Okay, great. Was there any money put in the budget for the Martha Culver House?
No.
No.
We have about 100,000 left over from that we haven't spent yet.
Just a little bit less.
A little bit less. So there will continue to be renovations from what we haven't spent in the past.
Okay, so the renovations, there's a plan to continue.
And we, my office is working very closely with that society, and I've explained it to them, and there will be continued renovations, but you might not see it in this budget here from the past.
Okay. Let's see. So the Quinnipiac voluntary payment, we know that it's going to be used toward the fire training facility. Has that been received yet?
No.
We're still working with that, and the new president has some challenges right now, but I've had dinner with her, lunch with her, so that ball's in my court.
Okay. And we don't know what it's going to be. We don't know when it's coming, and we don't know what it would be.
We're estimating, Mary, it's the same as we've received in the past, so.
Okay. Do we know if that amount will cover the fire training facility 100%? Like, will they need the entire amount? And the reason for that question is because if 24,000 of that money could go towards payment for the, excuse me, the 15 bulletproof vests and helmets that were eliminated.
So it's hard to say. The chief and I have met with the Carpenters Union. We're trying to see if there's an apprentice format. We don't think that's going to happen. So once we get the voluntary payment, there'll be probably a bid process to determine. The good news on the bid process, it's really sort of just a structure, not a lot of build out on the inside other than steps. So we're hoping it'll fall within the range of the Quinnipiac voluntary payment, but it's yet to be determined.
Okay. Was any money set aside for open space?
Not in this budget.
Not in this
We
budget.
didn't have any set aside.
No, the way it would work would be, we don't have any identifiable parcels. We just recently consummated the Neal property up at Peters Rock. So there would be, let's say 5 properties pop up, Mary. Then we would go to the public and try to bond for it, but we haven't built that in here, I don't believe, Ed, so. But it may have to wait a year, but right now, it's like we've said many times on open space, if there's no available sellers,
Right.
there's no option to buy.
Okay. Makes sense. And as far as like road paving, is there money set aside for that, or how does that work?
That's it.
I know we bond it.
Right.
And people have to, the town has to, meeting has to approve it.
I think we have money left from last year.
Last year,
but I don't
right.
think we have anything out there for
Right.
new paving.
So we'll carry some money over from last year. We're looking at, I think, 5 miles in the spring, and then we'll take it from there.
So the money carried over, we'll be able to do the paving in the spring?
Yes. Yes.
And let's see, okay. Yeah, I think that's all. So
Good, Mary. Thank you.
Very pleased, so.
Thank you.
Good job, guys.
Okay, thanks.
Good evening. Nancy Barrett, Crestview Drive. I'd just like to make some general comments about the budget proposal and then kind of go into some specifics. So the proposed budget draft includes an increase to capital expenditures of almost $1 million, and $735,000 of that will be allocated for the fire department. It also includes a 6.6% increase to the town budget.
That's not right.
for
That's
three-
not right.
That's not right. I think
No?
it's total dealing, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's like
but
900.
there's not 700 to fire.
936.
936 total.
Yeah, but you said 700 was for fire? I'm sorry. That's what I heard.
No?
Well, 300 is for the truck, the used truck, so.
Right,
Ladder truck.
for the ladder truck,
Yeah.
and I thought that there were additional fire expenditures. 6.6% increase to the town budget of $3 million, 2.9% increase to the BOE budget for $1.5 million, and overall a 4.9% total increase for $4.9 million. So last year at the public hearing, Mr. Frieda presented but did not endorse a 3.5% increase or a $3.4 million increase to our total budget. And ultimately, we the people approved a 2.4% increase of a smaller base. So I guess the question is, why is a 4.9% increase, almost $5 million, acceptable? This level of expenditures exceeds the town's annual revenue. The method of increasing the level of general fund transfers to subsidize expenditures becomes a very short-lived practice. The new contractual obligations will not be sustainable when the rainy day fund is dry and we're hit with the full force of the entire ever-growing debt service without any cushion from the debt reserves. As I understand, we'll have it this year and we'll have it next year, but the year after that, the debt reserves may not be there. And the proposed 0 increase to the mill rate, in my opinion, really reflects some smoke and mirrors accounting. It's achieved by including MRSA this year, aggressive revenue predictions, debt reserves from previous surpluses, and increasing fund balance transfers, as I mentioned. In my opinion, a $5 million budget increase is excessive and will not pass at referendum. This budget needs significant trimming. No new positions should be created or filled. The non-contractual raises, ranging from 8 to 18% and contributing to the over $1 million in personnel increases, should be significantly cut. And the mill rate, in my opinion, should be reduced. I'm hearing from people all over town, and I'm sure this entire board is hearing as well, from North Haven residents who are saying, enough with the spending, the debt, and the taxes. Many of the lifers in North Haven on fixed incomes who are living check to check feel as though they're being squeezed out of this town, and they deserve a win, both in the short term and in the long term. So that's just my opinion. So just sharing with you. Now, more of the specifics. Back in September, I believe Mr. Monaco shared his approach, and I believe it reflects the philosophy of the whole Board of Finance to the budget cycle, as well as to the fire work group, which is to try not to draw conclusions until we have accumulated all of the information. We're trying not to bias our opinions in any way. Is that pretty much accurate, what you said? Okay. So at last month's Board of Finance meeting, Mr. Frida stated that he spoke with the fire chief that day, and both the fire chief and the first selectman seemed to prefer the gradual approach of adding 2 firefighters per year. And if Mr. Hallahan had not laid out the short-term savings potential of the SAFER grant, I feel as though that decision would have been finalized right then and there. So the Board of Finance discussions and efforts to address the fire department requests were made, in fact, before the last 3 workshop presentations were even delivered. So how is it that you go about trying to solve a problem for one department before all of the workshops are actually presented?
We didn't. I don't understand anything you just said.
Yeah, your words are really ringing hollow here. We understand nothing about what you're talking about.
I'll try again.
Nothing.
You wait until all of the workshop presentations are made, and
that doesn't stop the first selectman from having the conversation.
No. I'm not saying he can't have a conversation, but
this board doesn't make those decisions till actually this past weekend.
I understand, but what he actually said was he was comfortable with that decision, and the fire chief was comfortable with that decision of adding 2 firemen per year for the next 3 years. So that sounded an awful lot like a decision was made. Did everyone get that impression?
There are seven members on this board.
I understand.
5 of them that can caucus because we're of the same party.
Yep.
Our caucus was this past Saturday when we resolved the items we had in the budget. The first selectman presented the budget as the Board of Selectmen do every year to us. I'm sure he has conversations with every department head every day.
That's what the town CEO does.
So back in December, Mr. Frida made the announcement, I have decided to add 2 firefighters, and the money is in the budget. And
now you're talking about the previous year budget.
No, it's for the current year budget.
Current year budget.
For the current year budget.
Previous to the one we're discussing tonight.
And then in February, he announced, I am not comfortable making this decision tonight. So that sounds an awful lot to me like the first selectman is actually making this decision regarding firefighter staffing.
Well, this is the 9th time we've addressed this, ladies and gentlemen. 6 times with Mrs. Barrett here. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I'm not sure if you're listening to what we're trying to describe to you.
I'm listening very carefully.
The 140,000 was in the budget. All of the analysis came through from the fire department, from the commission, from the Board of Finance, and we plugged in the recommendation of 2 firefighters. It wasn't what the Board of Finance wanted in terms of the daytime duty, but I have the responsibility or the authority, if you will, to make the decision as long as I don't overspend the budget. This is the 9th time I've mentioned this.
So you did make the decision, in other words?
We took all of the recommendations, and I
No, I'm
finally
saying
made
you personally.
We took all of the recommendations of all the committees that were involved, and we made the decision, yes. I don't know how many times I have to explain this to you.
I understand.
If you understand, why do you keep asking the question?
Because each time your words are just a little bit different.
No.
The first
I've been
time
very
it was
consistent.
that you were trying to serve the requests of the fire commission. Then it was that there's money in the budget. Then it was a group decision. So each time the words have changed just ever so slightly.
You're changing the narrative. I disagree with you, but you're entitled to your opinion. But remember this, you're always entitled to your opinion, but you're not entitled to make up your own facts.
I am not making up any facts. In fact, I'm quoting you. So,
Can we deal with this budget?
Yes.
Because some of the things
Yes.
you had just said, that people were getting 18% raises that were non-contract driven. Where are you coming up with that?
I'm still trying to understand how we come up with over $1 million in personnel salary increases.
You made a statement that people are getting 18% raises that weren't contract driven.
Well, I just don't understand how you can possibly have.
Well, why do you make the statements if you don't understand?
Increases.
You're making statements, but you're saying you don't understand, but you're making the statements. Why would you do something like that?
Well, you also have a Board of Finance member that asked the exact same
So
questions.
instead of making a statement, why wouldn't you ask a question? Because obviously you're uninformed, but you're making the statements. Why would you not ask the question rather than make statements?
The Board of Finance member asked the question. It was explained to the Board of Finance member. We're all aware of how we do it, how we reserve for contracts that aren't closed. There was no follow-up question because as soon as he was told that it was reserves, knew exactly what it was, and we went on. You did make a statement that is misleading to the public, saying that people are getting 18% raises that weren't contract.
I said 8 to 18.
Well,
And some of them were 8, and some of them were much higher.
but then you also added the words that weren't contract related or weren't contract driven. That's a false. That's all I was.
That's a false statement.
That's all I was saying.
Okay.
If you have a question like, why is this person getting 18%, we'll answer a question like that in the same way we answer to any board member that may have had the question. But if you make a statement, I take exception to that.
Okay. All right. So the assessor who's made an 8% increase to his salary, that's a step increase, or what? Is that contractual? There were at least four different 8% increases that resulted in pretty significant.
Are you talking about the new position and
No, I'm saying.
I'm talking about the positions that were not negotiated for 3 years.
Right. No.
Right, that was not.
That's what she's
Those-
trying
those
to
are
find
cler-
out.
those
Why
are
is
cle-
it so
those are
high?
clerical. I'm saying
It's
some
high
of the other
because they were or they were, I don't know. It was a
Contract
3-year
was over.
contract that was not laid out properly. I shouldn't say not laid out properly, but wasn't negotiated and finalized, and they were finally finalized from what Ed is saying a little previously.
Yeah, right, in the prior budget, the assessor's difference was in contractual obligation line. So he falls under the same category.
And it's
When I
been
became
multi-years.
when I became chairman,
Mm-hmm.
what the Board of Finance used to do was they would budget in every line item a percentage for contract negotiations. And everyone's seen the number there. And I said, we can't do that. So we created another line where any contract that ends, we shift the dollars into a separate fund, so it's not telegraphing to the unions or whoever we're negotiating with how much we've put aside for it. That was the whole purpose of it. And that's why you'll see years where it jumps, 4 or 6% or 8%, depending on how long that contract was driven. We've held the money into a separate account.
Right.
It's a separate line item.
And they get paid
And then when
retroactively.
well, yeah, they get paid retroactively, but the money's sitting there. It's held in a separate account.
Right.
So now that the contract is finished, that line item for that department, if it's fire, if it's police, if it's public works, is going to jump drastically. It's going to look like it's jumping drastically. It doesn't. Money's just shifted from another account to that because it probably was only a 2% increase since the previous year.
Right.
But you got to take it in context so you understand where it's coming from. It's not, there are places that, more on the Board of Ed, I think, than on the town side, but there are places in the contracts where they get a raise, and based on term of service, how many years they've been in service, there's some step increases. Those are the other ones that jump more than the 2% that they normally might get.
Right. So then you also have lines like longevity, and
That's different.
Those are different. That's in
different.
addition to that.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, you have stipends for paramedics.
Right.
Those are different. That's not.
Exactly. No, I understand. Okay, so
I just want you to be careful that you just don't mislead the public because you are in front of a microphone.
I understand. I'm trying very hard to be as accurate and using quotes wherever I can. So regarding the 2 firefighters that were hired, so I learned that
Last
they're
year's
not
budget we're talking about?
the ones that were hired back in December. Or Mr. Frieda announced back in
Okay.
December that they would be hired, and that they should go into the academy in January, and that the money was in the budget. So
Okay.
they were not able to go into the academy in January. They couldn't fit them in. So so I guess they're going into the academy in September, from September to December.
don't
And
think that's
this is
true.
according to the fire chief at the most recent fire commission.
They're not going until this coming September?
Not until September. And
Now, we have a lot of money left over.
and that they're studying, I guess, for their paramedic certification. So,
No, you're wrong
I guess
again.
that's
think-
actually my-
I think you're wrong. I really do. Michael, what were you saying?
It was my understanding that they were hired, and I don't know.
Are they paramedics?
That part I do not know.
I think they're still studying to be
I think-
fully certified.
They have a.
We don't
think
know.
that
I don't know.
They have
I hate
a
to
role
comment
within the
there.
department.
They have some role,
They have
yes,
a support
exactly.
role within the department.
I'm not sure
that
exactly
may or
doing
may
what,
not
so-
include firefighting. I don't know if they.
So that's my question is, has the $140,000 actually been transferred to the fire department yet?
They've been charged against that line.
It'll be charged against the line we
It'll
have
be
in our
charged
budget.
against
We don't transfer the
You
money.
don't transfer, it's just
No.
charged against it.
Right.
It's in the
It's
budget.
in their
Charged
budget.
against that.
No, it's not.
Right, but it wasn't actually in their budget, so I wasn't sure how that was handled. Okay, and then, Mr. Monaco, just one other question. Do you believe, because last month you talked about the cost of the firefighters, and it's about $120,000 a year, but that's not fully loaded, right? That doesn't include, their
Overtime.
well, everything, salary, benefits, training, PPE, overtime, holidays,
Yeah,
contractual
that's
replacement, all of that.
120?
So 120, I think, was just the base salary, wasn't
that
it?
can't
Plus
be
No,
base
no,
salary.
that's
That's
salary,
gotta be full
that's probably salary and benefits.
And benefits,
But there
right.
are also things, there are other things that go along with that.
Right,
The
of course.
PPE, which is like $3,500 maybe?
That's 7.
Yeah, no,
Right.
I mean, there's other
But it's
things.
customized.
She's making a comment. What I was referring to is besides hiring the person,
All the other expenses.
there's
Right,
other
right.
things, there's other expenses the town has
Right.
besides the physical body.
Right, so for the
That's your
remainder,
question, yes.
for the second half of this year, is it your estimation that the fully loaded costs of the 2 newly hired firefighters will actually exceed the $140,000?
What?
Try that one again?
Okay, so the 2 people that were hired.
Yeah.
And they were only supposed to be in the second half of this year,
Which
the
is
current
where-
fiscal budget.
Which is where they are.
Right. Do you think, based upon your familiarity now with the fire department and all of the costs of onboarding, as well as the costs associated with being a practicing firefighter, do you
I
think
have
it'll
no
exceed?
idea.
No, I'm just asking you.
I don't know.
Well, restate that question, because I think you're way off on this, but I want to make sure I understand your question.
Okay, so if you bring in 2 non-grade A firefighters, meaning you bring them in as C, and you're going to have to train them at the academy, bring them back in, give them personal protective equipment, as well as give them the opportunity to do work on holidays and contractual replacement and all of the other built-in costs associated with functioning as a firefighter, do you think that the cost for a half a year of these 2 new firefighters will actually exceed $140,000?
No, I mean,
I know it shouldn't. I'm asking, do you
I
think
don't
it
even
will?
know
No,
how you can even make that assessment when you just said earlier they haven't been hired yet, and I think you were wrong about that. So,
No. I didn't say they hadn't been hired. No. I said
So-
they hadn't gone to the academy.
but your
They
question...
have been hired.
It's sort of a convoluted question, because we have $140,000 to spend in this budget.
I know.
That's the line item. That's
I know
we're
what the line
spending.
item is.
So-
I'm asking, does he think it's going to exceed the line item amount?
If I thought the 2 men were going to exceed the line item, I would have made the line item larger.
Can I interject for just a
Maybe,
second?
if that's what they were going to do.
We're going back and forth over the exact costs of these 2 individuals, and maybe there's a larger point I'm missing, Nancy. The fire department's budget for this year is $4,477,000.
Yes.
Every month, we talk sometimes in more detail, sometimes in less, about who's over, who's under, what's the expense for this, what's the expense for that. The fire department, Jim mentioned it, the overtime tends to run over. That's one particular line. He has to manage to a budget. Let's assume for a minute it's more than 140, maybe it's 150. He's got to find 10 grand. just like he has to find money for other line items, because it's just impossible to hit these line items exactly. His job is to manage to the number he got.
I understand.
Okay, and if it's going to cost more than the 140, he's got to manage to it. So if there's a greater point I'm missing, then please tell us. But we're going on and on about what's, relatively speaking, small dollars compared to his $4.5 million budget, because we're talking about the difference of, is it 120, is it 140? Again, unless I'm missing the point of the question.
Yeah, I don't get, I'm not sure of the question. What the
We
point
pulled
is.
an arbitrary number. When we put it together, it was just an arbitrary number that we thought to put something aside for it.
So I'm making the point because Mr. Frieda was very, very clear when you were going through the work group that no matter what the cost is of whatever expenditure
We
that you
weren't gonna
decide to
exceed the
use
budget.
this money for, it could not exceed $140,000.
So isn't that the answer?
It should be the answer.
So
I'm
that-
asking, do you think it will be?
So, but if
Right.
you already have
I'm
the answer,
expecting it to be.
if you already have the answer, why would you ask Mr. Monaco the question what he thinks that's the
Because
answer?
he was speculating about the costs, all of the
I'm
costs
sorry,
of the
Nancy.
fire
I don't
department.
follow your line of questioning here. I'm sorry. I have a question for you, by the way.
Yes.
Did you vote for the middle school?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Did you vote for the police department?
No, I was not there for that.
Okay. So you voted for the middle school.
Yes.
A $69 million project.
Yes, I did.
Did you not think when you voted for the middle school that somewhere along the line the debt line would escalate? So you're talking about the debt service, and you seem to be at odds with the debt service. Did you
No,
not?
I'm not at odds with the debt service. I'm just trying, as I've asked before, I think that Mr. Swinkowski should give a presentation, and you should give a presentation to the people of North Haven about what is the gross debt service, and then what is the net debt service each year, with taking off for the debt reserves, for taking off for money that's been set aside for various construction projects, et cetera, so that we can see this is what it could be, this is what it is, and over time, what do we expect that it could be, down the road?
But you talked about a 4.9% spending. You seem to be complaining about that. 56% of that 4.9% is debt service.
Yes, I understand that.
Of which, I'm not sure if you were listening earlier, but of which I explained in detail how we're going to offset that this year, and I mentioned about how we're going to offset a portion of that next year.
So last year, when we had a 2.4% increase, what percentage of that was debt service?
Well, 6.6 million out of that budget was debt service. So every year, you see, again, you're asking a question that doesn't quite make sense. Every year, when we look at our budget, we have had about 7% of our debt service to expenditures, highly under-leveraged. We're talking two different things here, which I'm not really sure you understand. I said earlier that out of the 4.9%, about 56% of that 4.9% increase is because of debt, because of one of the very projects you voted on, the middle school.
Yes,
So-
one of the debts.
So
It also
one of-
includes the police department.
It includes the police department, and also it includes
High
still paying
school,
off on the firehouses
The
and
high
the firehouse.
school, the firehouses, the paving, all of those things.
So if you
yes.
take the 56% of the 4.9% out, we're at a reasonable increase, and I can make an argument that the 4.9% is largely derived from improving the town, from building a new middle school, which was on the verge of being condemned, for building a new police department, which puts our officers in safety versus an asbestos-ridden department, that were outdated jail cells. I can tell the public stories about what went on in that police department.
Yes.
Firehouses that really needed repair. Roadways 10 miles a year. So before you make a general statement about spending at 4.9%, I would suggest that you analyze the 4.9% and look at the 56% of that in terms of the projects that we put forward with the town that have improved the town.
I
That,
understand.
by the way,
I
the
have.
Greater New Haven Realtors Association tells me more new families want to move into town because of all of the middle school, the high school, the fields, the new police department, and by the way, a 31.16 mill rate, or 31.18. So I'm being told we're attracting new families.
I hope we do. But looking statistically, our total population has been declining, and our school enrollment has also been declining. So when that takes an uptick, then I'll be just as happy as you will, but that's not the case today.
So we have a no tax increase. We have a grand list that's growing, that's going to continue to grow.
Right.
And you're not happy with this budget.
I am not happy with an additional $5 million added to our budget.
Again.
I'm not.
So then you would then say, based on what you said, that you would have preferred us to not build a new middle school, build a new police department. Where do you think part of that expenditure is coming from this year?
Part of the expenditure is debt, and the other half of it is expenditures that I believe could be trimmed.
Well,
debt is debt. I understand that.
Wait,
so that's my point.
She did say she didn't want to hire the additional personnel, which means you didn't want the firemen and you didn't want the dispatchers.
I definitely didn't want the firemen, for sure.
Did you want the dispatchers?
There's 4 dispatchers. That's one of
the 4 part-time dispatchers, I don't think is going to break the bank.
They're full-time. Well, I mean, so you see.
The 4 additionals?
You need to really do a little bit more homework on the facts, I think.
Okay.
Because if you looked at it, you would see that there's 4 dispatchers that are being hired starting in January of next year. So in effect, it's half of the cost.
It's half year.
So this is what I was saying to you earlier.
I see.
Before you make statements, ask questions.
So full-time, but half year.
Right.
Gotcha. Okay. So Mr. Hallahan also stated, excuse me, at the last Board of Finance meeting, we're here to solve problems in town. And I believe that there's a prevalent belief that if we somehow get up to 10 firefighters per shift, that all of our public safety problems will be solved. So my question to the Board of Finance is with regard to the fire department funding, what problems are you targeting? And in what way will incrementally hiring additional firefighters at 2 per year for 3 years, added to each of the 4 24-hour shifts, solve whatever problem you're targeting? And the reason I'm asking is the work group recommended and still stands by weighted day duty paramedics, and they did not conclude that the operation of a second pumper engine was necessary for the call profile, which is mostly medical. So why are we supporting that? Why not support manning a second ambulance as opposed to a second pumper engine?
That's the fire commission.
Right, I mean,
You have to talk to them.
Well, so
they have complete jurisdiction over it.
So at the fire commission,
another engine.
At the last fire commission, Sally Buemi actually attended. I was not able to be there, and she asked the chief a critical question. That all of this started in August of 2017 when there was a house fire and all 8 firefighters were dispatched to the house fire. There was a medical call that came in and no one was dispatched to the medical call. The police responded, AMR responded, but no one from the fire department. And so Ms. Buemi asked if we got up to 10 people, hypothetically, and there was a house fire, she asked the police chief what would happen, who would be dispatched, and he responded by saying everyone would be dispatched, as Mr. Lianos pointed out.
I assume you meant fire because you said police.
I'm sorry, fire. Everyone would be dispatched, and if a medical call came in at the same time, we would be in the exact same situation. So in other words, moving forward towards this target of 10 men per shift, whether we do it all at once through a SAFER grant or we do it incrementally, will not actually address the problem of increased medical calls and coexisting calls. So I'm just trying to understand, what problem are you trying to solve by increasing the fire department staffing?
You know, I have to admit, part of what you're saying, I don't disagree with Nancy, but I guess I look at it sort of simplistically here. Okay? You know, I wasn't involved in all the meetings, but, you know, I did. The fire chief has been in front of the board before. He's getting effectively 2 guys this year, half year, fine, but he's got 2 guys and 2 more half year, right? So that's a question for him. And from what I understand, it's the medical calls that are driving a lot of this. So I guess I prefer you put him on an ambulance. But we can't run the department. That's been made very clear. That they complained about it. We had some conversations here about the fact that, you know, we allocate resources based on the discussions we have, based on the arguments they make, okay? It'd be my preference the chief do that, but he's not willing to do that, I guess, right now. They are going to be paramedics, I believe. but I guess you gotta take that up with the fire commission. We certainly give them the resources.
Well, I guess that's the control that you do have.
Right.
If they are allocating resources in a way that do not serve the best interests of the town of North Haven, then you absolutely have the ability to reduce that funding source, do you not?
I would say you're right.
Okay. And just lastly, I would just like to say the Board of Education is very well funded. The board expects to have, they build their budget annually, I think, with an expectation that the Board of Finance will make some cuts, and this year there were no cuts.
In reality, we cut them $159,000.
Mm-hmm. So that was down to the 2.9 or from 2.9 down to?
The budget numbers say the same. They had to absorb the pension.
They had to absorb
it was just the pension. I see what that is. Okay, and I would just like to point out that the 18 administrator salaries amount to over $2.5 million.
The number the board's very familiar with.
Yeah, we're aware.
Which I find shocking.
Which we don't control.
I understand.
Go talk to them, ask them why.
I would just like to recommend that we ask the administrators to actually cover the costs of classroom supplies that the teachers typically pay for out of pocket. So, thank you very much for your time.
Nancy, before you leave the mic, I'd like to make one comment, and that is
please.
During the fire workshop, Mr. Hallahan here discussed breaking up the staff to accommodate firemen going to a fire and having men at the firehouse for additional emergencies. The chief kind of took offense to that. The union president happened to be sitting in the back of the room, and he stormed out.
I'm sure.
Because
he did.
they were under the impression that Mike, Mr. Hallahan here, was trying to manage the firehouse, and the chief felt that was his job. So you mentioned that we have the authority. We don't have that authority at all. We approve budgets. And we hone in and try to save the town money. But discipline and working to directing traffic at a firehouse, we don't have that authority.
But if you don't give them the money for the additional firefighters, then they can't hire them, right? So you do have that power.
We have that power, but we don't have the power to set.
Just as you did last year when they asked for 16 firefighters and you didn't give them those.
What I'm trying to express to you is that we don't have the authority to manage his staff. The chief was kind of upset the fact that he felt that this board was, or one of the people on this board was trying to manage his staff, and that's well beyond our capability.
Well, I think, as I've mentioned before, I quoted Tim, who he said way back when, it is the job of the Board of Finance to ask questions of the experts. If the experts view that as micromanagement, well, then that's on them. But it is absolutely your job to ask the tough questions and make the tough decisions.
That's what we do in the workshop
Yeah, I'm not offended by that.
Yes, no, I agree.
We do that all the time.
So I think you do that. So, anyone that questions that, I think, is wrong.
Thank
So,
you.
thank you.
Anyone else? Sally first, please. Oh, she was up first. She beat you up.
I don't know where to start. I'll start with, good evening, Mr. Chairman. Sally Buemi, 5 Blossom Drive. Before I start with my prepared comments, I wanted to address one issue that came up in Mr. Frieda's discussion with Ms. Barrett, where he kept saying that there is a $4.8 million increase in this expenditure budget, correct? 4.8 million?
And 2.8 is debt.
Okay, but you're saying 56% of that is debt. The problem I have with that statement is, if you look on page 36 of the budget, 1.4 of that 2.6 is out of the budget. If you look at the line item, and I discussed this with Mr. Smikowski in detail yesterday on the phone, right? It's going from 6.6 million to 7.6 million. So only 1 million of the debt increase is in this budget.
But it'd be offset.
So that's not.
It's offset. I'm looking at the bottom line, Sally.
No. The total increase is 2.4 million. But 1.4 of that, according to Mr. Swnkowski, is out of the budget. It's that debt service fund that you guys set up last month is not in this budget, and the 1.4 million of the debt increase is not in this budget. If you look on page 36, and I urge you to please look, you will see that it only, in this budget that goes up 4.8 million, only 1 million of that is a debt increase, and that's after, because you see there's a little note on the bottom. That's the net amount after the fund. So to say that 56% of the 4.8 million is incorrect. It's 1 million of the 4.8 is in here, closer to 20%. Is that true, Mr. Swnkowski?
$1.4 million is paid out of debt service.
That's not what I asked. I know that $1.4 million is being deducted. Of the $4.8 million increase that is reflected in this budget, $4.8 million in expenditures, how much of that $4.8 million is debt in expenditures in this budget?
$1.6 million.
Why isn't it just $1 million? Because it went from $6,679,000. $1,006,000. So I said $1 million. Okay, so $1 million out of 4.8 is the portion that is debt related, which is approximately 20%, 21, maybe 22%, not 56. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Well, I'm not on board with you on this. So,
okay, he's saying that
right,
what I'm saying is true.
So we go from 6.6 to 9.4 million on debt, right? Total debt.
You told me 9.1 yesterday.
9.4.
But not all of that 2.5.
But as it relates to a mill rate calculation, our debt went up 2.8 from 6.6 to 9.4.
He told me yesterday 9.1.
Yeah, total
all right, so it went from it went 6.6 to 9.1. That's 2.5. Okay, but 1.4 of that is not in this budget. Mr. Swnkowski, how much of the $4.8 million increase is the debt increase? You just said 1,006,000, which is pretty close to $1 million flat. Okay, so right. We know now. You know what I want to do with this. You know that I want this to be more accurate and more transparent. I would prefer that this line item be, instead of 7.685, again, if you're looking on page 36, the debt is 7,685,746. I would prefer that it say 9.1 million, which is actually the real debt.
Right, but it's not going to show that.
I know, but wait a minute. Let me just finish. No, let me finish my point, and then show the 1.4 debt service fund as a revenue line item. Then it would balance out.
But then I'd have to show that for all the capital projects that we spend money on. We spent $5,400,000 out of the PD and the middle school. And then after you've shown all that in here, that's not.
No, you don't. But
it's the same thing.
No, look at. To me, you created a special fund last month called the Debt Service Fund, not the Debt Reserve Fund, the Debt Service Fund. I have the minutes. If you look at your minutes.
I understand that.
Okay, so it's the Debt Service Fund. So I don't like that on page 36, your notation on the bottom says net amount paid from debt reserve of 1,400,000. It really should say debt service fund. But the reason, and I'll tell you why I think that's confusing in a minute, and we talked about it yesterday, so I think you already know. But the point that I'm trying to make is, let's look just for a second on the top of page 7, which is page 1 of the revenue budget, okay? You have, under revenue, you have the fund balance amounts, fine. Next one down is project fund transfers. Where's that money from?
The 200,000?
Yeah.
Police outside.
Right, so that's from a special fund. So that's my point. Why couldn't you have right there the debt service fund, 1.4 million? I'm not talking that, why does that open up the floodgates for the 5 million? I understand what your point about the 5 million that was used in the middle school as part of the cost for upfront for borrowing money. That's completely different. You have money now that you set it up last month in a debt service fund, and you're using, it's got about $2.8 million in there. You're using 1.4 million of it this fiscal year to buy down that $9.1 million debt, correct?
The 2.8 is already in the general fund.
Yes, that's what I just said. But I thought you, yes.
Can I suggest that you just meet up with Ed and you can go through this issue?
Well, here's the point that I'm trying to make. Let me go back to my original point.
Okay.
Mr. Frieda kept telling Ms. Barrett that of the $4.8 million increase in expenditure, 56% was the debt. And that is incorrect. According to Mr. Swinkowski, only $1 million is in this budget. Correct? $1,006,000. That's not 1.6 million. It's 1 million and then 6,000 at the end.
I think we're talking semantics. I
No, we're not, because what that means is the other 3.8 million is not from debt, and so that was what I think her point was.
So are you happy with the no tax increase?
No.
You're not. So you're not happy with the no tax increase?
No, and now that I've made my point that your 56% was incorrect and misleading, that it should have been more like 20%, I will go to my regular presentation.
Okay.
And you will hear what I want to say.
Thank you.
Yeah, I will.
Thank you.
Okay. Before I talk about what I want to do with the budget, I just want to ask some housekeeping questions. And I'm going to go back to what I talked about with Mr. Swinkowski yesterday, which is on page 6 of the proposed 1920 budget. Under the funding section, okay? And this is why I had a problem with how that notation on page 36, it was called debt reserve, 1.4 million. You'll notice here that a new item is created called GF, which stands for General Fund Debt Reserves, and it's 1.4 million. That looks a lot like the 1.4 million that's listed on page 36, but it is not the same amount, correct? Okay. So my question is, in previous budgets, and I have 17-18 and 18-19 here, there was no separate debt reserve line item. You just created it for the first time for this budget, correct? Yep.
Right.
Yes,
We haven't
okay.
used any debt reserve funds before, so that's why I said a new line for it, just so people were aware.
Okay, but let's keep this perfectly straight. That is not anything to do with the debt service fund that was set up last month.
Correct.
Okay.
It is,
Right.
I should have changed the numbers a little bit.
Right.
to make it-
But here's my question, because in previous budgets, where it starts under funding on page 6, the first item is always unrestricted fund balance. That number is always the total of the first 2 line items on page 7, the appropriated and unappropriated. And I can give you, if I may I approach Mr. Chairman and give you those 2.
You're more than welcome to sit with Ed anytime you want to, Tullius, and go through the housekeeping. And
I did talk to him, and I want this to be publicly known, because I think the way it's presented on page 6 of this current budget of 1920 is misleading. I don't understand why it just doesn't say unrestricted fund balance, and then going to the top of page 7 of your 1920 book, why it just doesn't say $2,525,000. Because that's really what we're taking from the fund balance, and that's how it has been done in previous years. So to me, it is misleading the public as to exactly what is being used from the general fund by splitting it up. For example, in 17-18, that unrestricted fund balance line was $1,731,172. And if you look at page 7, you can see where that total came from. $400,000 from appropriated, $1.3 million from unappropriated. And then I gave you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Swinkowski, I gave you the 18-19 again, and you'll see that it's always been the total of those top 2 line items on page 7. So I think it's just a little misleading the way it's presented in this 19-20 budget to separate them out. Because if you were to look at this and you didn't understand what GF debt reserve is, or you made the mistake of thinking that it was the debt service fund, which is also, unfortunately, $1.4 million. And as you and I talked about yesterday on the phone, Ed, we said that could be part of the confusion. It's the exact same number, correct? Do you remember talking about that?
Either way, no matter how I slice it, it's all part of our overall fund balance.
Right, but so we're really using $2,525,000 from our fund balance to fund this increase. Is that correct? Even though you split it up for the first time this year in this unusual way, we're really using, again, $2,525,000 from our fund balance?
Ed, would it make sense to change the GF debt reserves to appropriated so it ties in with 7 a little better? Would that?
Yeah,
would that
We
sound?
can change it, but the bottom line is not going to change.
The number's the number.
No, I know they're not going to change, but I think in the interest of clarity, I think if the people were to look at this and say, oh, last year we only used $1,050,000 from the fund balance. This year we're using just $1,125,000, and they're not going to go down and see that 1.4 and realize that it's really $2,525,000. I was confused by it because of the use of debt reserve here on page 36, and I know a little bit about what's going on. I'm trying to make it more understandable to the folks that show up.
We'll entertain changing a name.
Thank you. Okay, that's number 1. All right. Number 2, I do agree with Ms. Barrett, who talked about some aggressive revenue predictions. And I'm just saying this because I found it a little strange, because in the past, Mr. Frida has often stated that he would tend to be, that it would be preferable to be more conservative in making revenue predictions. And the 4 examples I'm going to give are 1, or A, the ECS, you are predicting $3,785,369, which is, if you recall, Mr. Frida, at the Board of Selectmen meeting, I had presented for discussion the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities table on what they were predicting for our state revenue for this coming year, the fiscal year coming forward. Do you remember? I brought that up. And they were predicting a healthy ECS number. And so I was surprised that you are actually predicting, because really the revenue budget is a lot of prediction. Wouldn't you agree, Mr.
You have
Chairman?
to understand, Sal, you've been doing this a long time with us now.
Yeah.
We have an obligation tonight to set a mill rate based on the numbers we've been given.
Right.
That's what we're doing.
Right, but you know, the reason why I think that's, we've been given numbers before and still budgeted way less. And I'll give you an example. And that was in the 15-16 budget, where it was 3.8, but in the following fiscal year, we only budgeted 3.3. So there is some history of underestimating revenue, even with the knowledge of what it could be. So I felt that the fact that you made the ECS amount, and I have some statistics on ECS from the last few fiscal years. It was 3.3, 3.2, 3.3, and 3.3, and 3.4. So, and this was even, so we were always in that 3.2 to 4 area, even if we received more or were told we were going to get more. You guys were always very conservative with the ECS. I'm not complaining, I'm commenting that I thought that you were unusually aggressive with the ECS number. So I'd keep it there, but I just found it unusual that you did in fact go with the higher number when in previous years you tended to be very conservative with your ECS predictions.
Your next point?
Pilot is the same thing. I thought that you were pretty aggressive with the pilot, and again, you used the same exact number from the CCM, when in the past, even when we got higher pilot numbers, your revenue prediction for the following year was lower. The same, I'm just giving examples of what I thought. I've made a statement that I thought there were some aggressive revenue predictions, and I think I'm entitled to give my examples. I don't appreciate being hurried in doing it. C, interest on short-term investments, the 400,000. You'll see that in the revenue budget. Again, you know, in 17-18, we had shown 315,000 for that line item, but for 18-19, the current year, we still kept it at 150.
But Sally, we're at 364 right now, and we all know rates are going up.
Right. This year, it seems like it's over 300,000, just like it was last year over 300,000, but still in 18-19, for prediction purposes, we kept it low at 150, even though the previous year we got well over 300,000. So again, I saw that as an aggressive prediction based on prior performances. And then finally, the paramedic fees, I also found at 170 to be aggressive. I'm hopeful. I mean, Tim, you might remember the Board of Selectmen meeting, the Board of Selectmen workshop in 2016, when the chief actually attended. You were on the Board of Selectmen at the time. That was the only Board of Selectmen workshop where any department head ever attended. And that was when he made the presentation to us to hire a new training bill review officer to start this paramedic billing procedure. And at the time, and let me quote the minutes, this is the Board of Selectmen workshop from January 11, 2016, after the chief made his presentation to hire this new person to start paramedic billing. You might recall, Tim, that he gave us a chart of projected revenues, and some of those projections were in excess of $400,000 a year. And we said, as a board, quote, the board agreed to advise the Board of Finance that they agreed with some of the underlying goals of the chief's proposal, but felt they can only endorse the related expense if the costs can be offset by the revenue generated by the proposed model. Well, last year, we only took in $19,000, but they get a pass. It was the first year, and there were a lot of accounts receivable. This year, we're only at $37,000. And we're, you know, more than 50% through the fiscal year. I don't think that his paramedic program is working out the way we were told that it would. And then again, that's my fourth example of an aggressive revenue predictions. Again, I'm not saying that you should reduce them. I just was a little surprised at how aggressive they were given past performances. And I also, I have to agree a bit with the point that Ms. Barrett made about the total increase in townside personnel, which you see reflected on page 45 of your proposed 1920 budget book. The current year, it's $13,793,000. In the proposed book for 1920, it's going up to $14,905,000, which is an increase of $1,112,000, or 8%. And again, looking historically, from 15-16 to 16-17, that line went up 3.3%. From 16-17 to 17-18, it went up again 3.3%. In the current budget of 18-19, it went from 3.6 to 3.79, a 1.2% increase. This year it is 8%. But being on the Board of Selectmen, I am very well aware that a big part, a significant part of that increase is because of the renewed union contracts. We did fire, we did clerical. What else did we do this year? I thought there was a third one, and I couldn't remember. Yeah.
But you got to keep in mind too, Sally, that
Right.
if you look back at contractual obligations, that amount dropped by 215,000. So that you would take off that difference in salaries.
Right.
You had over
Yeah,
$1 million or whatever.
Yeah, it was 1.1 million.
Yeah,
And
back off.
contractual obligations went down, what, about 215,000?
The net of those.
So with a net of about 900,000. Right. And you said that the supervisors was done last year, not this year.
Yeah, that was done before.
So when Ms. Barrett was asking you about the 8% raises for the assessor, the building inspector, the engineer, and the IT, you said that was because of a new contract.
Yeah, it could have the old rate in it last year. You know what I'm saying? It could have been in contractual obligations last year.
Yeah, but nobody gets 8% for 1 year.
No,
If-
no, it
yeah.
was more than 1 year.
It could have been
Yeah,
3
but
years.
I thought you said we had already done the supervisors, not this year, but the prior year. So wouldn't that have been true for the 18-19 budget, not the 19-20?
The rates might not have changed in that, but we still might have been in contractual obligations.
Okay.
Depends on when they did the rest.
Yeah, I'll have to find, yeah, okay. And I just wanted to ask on page 25, under IT, the maintenance contract, I noticed a 76% increase. So that seems significant, from 60,000 to 105,840. Did that go out to bid, or, I just wondered if you could give an explanation. One of the first things I do when I get a new proposed budget is I look down really quick at all those percentage increases. And so when I saw the 76, I marked it with my pen. Again, that's page 25 under IT.
I think hopefully the IT person was on to make sure we don't have issues.
I'm sorry,
There was an item where it said, there was an increase of, is that maintenance? There's an increase of 45,000 for fiscal year 19 due to increased security measures, and there was a 50,000 due to software implementation. To Viewpoint Cloud software. That was in his explanation. Yeah.
We had some software.
It was in his presentation.
Okay. I mean, you could acknowledge, Mr. Chairman, my concern over it. Okay. So.
But I mean, it was in all the
understand.
documents. You can see it.
Okay.
Okay.
So what would I do about this budget? Well, let me tell you. At first blush, when you look at a budget that proposes $4.8 million in a $4.8 million increase in spending with no mill rate increase,
We
you
thank
say,
Mr. Frieda for.
how, the next paragraph does that a little bit. How could you fight a no mill increase budget? Or how can you complain about one? And first, you have to look at how the $4.8 million in increased spending is being funded, given that there's no mill rate increase. Well, one reason, one thing that I must do and feel compelled to do is to commend the first selectman for the 2.8% growth in the grand list, which generates about $2.3 million in additional tax revenue. I agree that Mr. Frieda works tirelessly on economic development, and the 2.8% growth in the grand list is one of the highest that I've seen, and I've studied many towns. So he should certainly be commended for that. So that generates about 2.3 million of the 4.8 million increase. But that's just part of the story. And again, as I said in my opening remarks when I was discussing the funding portion on page 6 of the budget, we are using $2,525,000 from the fund balance. And that's taxpayer money, our savings account, our rainy day fund, whatever you want to call it, that's been building up from huge surpluses, 1.7 million in 17-18, and the year before that, 1.8 million. And I have Mr. Swinkowski's summaries of those 2 fiscal years that conclude 1.7 and 1.8, if anyone would like to see those letters that you get every August at the August Board of Finance meeting. I have those with me to document the 1.7 surplus and the year before the 1.8. I thought that in 17-18, we had an excellent chance to give the taxpayers a well-deserved break in the mill rate. But despite my strong objections, we kept 1.4 million, the MRSA money, out of the budget. I knew it was coming in. I think other people knew that it was going to come in. We left it out of the revenue budget, and we did ultimately get it. And so, boom, there we go. We had a $1.7 million surplus. I think reasonable surpluses in the area of $500,000 to $600,000 are healthy and good and important for the rating agencies when they evaluate us and to keep our AAA. However, I think 1.7 and 1.8 million dollar surpluses is borderline overtaxation. And so I believe that this is the time. We missed our opportunity in 17-18 when we left the 1.4 MRSA out of the revenue budget. I believe we at least deserve, the taxpayers now deserve in 1920 some sort of reduction in taxes because, as Mr. Frieda has said, and as I have said many times, the number one complaint that I hear from citizens is how high taxes are getting. So I think we missed our opportunity 2 years ago, and this year, because we're using so much money from the fund balance, and because we have 2.3 million extra in revenue, thanks to Mr. Frieda's economic development efforts, now is the time to give the citizens a break and keep the revenue budget where it is and reduce some expenditures. So what would I cut? Okay. I modified my cuts a little bit in light of some of the discussions you guys had. So my total reduction is about, it was 853. It's about 817,000 that I have in cuts. And let me tell you where I would make them. Number one, in the capital budget. It is currently $936,000. That's the proposed capital budget, $936,000, which is a 67% increase from the current budget. Of that $936,000, $735,000 is to the fire department. That's 79%. So the cuts that I would make in the capital to the fire department are, I would cut the $300,000 for the used ladder truck. I've seen the Pierce ladder that's at Northeast, and yes, it does have some rust on it, but it is functional and certainly functional as a backup to our brand new $1.2 million ladder truck. I would also cut the $40,000 administrative vehicle. I would keep the $60,000 in for the headquarters generator. We do need that, but once again, I have to say this is the second time the taxpayers are being asked to fund that generator, and we don't need to go through all that again. In police, I would cut $45,000 from the cruiser line. Every year they ask for 3, and every year that I've been around, we give them 2. So I would give them 2 and cut 45 there. So that is $385,000 cut from the capital budget, which would reduce it to $551,000. And just so the fire department doesn't think I'm picking on them, because they think I am all the time, let me say that even with my cuts, the fire department would still be getting $395,000, which is 72% of the capital budget. So that's $385,000 there. I had talked about eliminating that position at the fire department, but after Ms. Brown asked about it, and based on the answers that she was given, I'm going to withdraw eliminating that position. Next, I would go to the Board of Ed. Again, to my best recollection, I've never seen the Board of Ed get everything that they've asked for. I do commend them for their initial budget request, which was a reasonable 2.9%. We have seen many unreasonable initial requests presented to this board in the past, and you've made huge cuts in there. But I've never seen them get every penny. And in fact, even when I served on the Board of Finance in the 80s, we never gave them every penny they asked for. After the January, I believe January 7th, 2019 Board of Selectmen workshop, we issued a letter, we meaning the Board of Selectmen, issued a letter to the Board of Finance stating our preference or our directive that increases be capped at 2.6%. And you all got a letter to that effect in your January packet of your January Board of Finance meeting. So based on that, even though I believe the Board of Ed came in with a good, a reasonable first budget, I would reduce them by $158,104, bringing them to a 2.6% increase. So that's $158,104. I feel that they could live with that. I've been studying very closely what other town budgets are. I'm constantly reading about other budgets and reading on their websites, and I see many budget BOE increases under 2%. So I think that reducing them to 2.6 is doable. Next one, and this is a goodie, is the fire department on page 28, $150,000 for consultants. I rewatched the fire department workshop that was held on January 19th, 2019. I watched it about 2 o'clock this morning. During the workshop with the fire department, there was quite an extensive discussion of this $150,000. Keep in mind, in the current year, that line item is 0. And there was a lot of discussion, mostly from Mr. Hallahan and Mr. Monaco, asking the fire chief why staff was not doing more inspections. Now, let's be very clear. We have fire inspections, which should not be confused with plan reviews. Fire plan reviews do generate income, and that changed in June 20th of 2016 at a town meeting when we adopted a new building fee schedule, and we meaning the town meeting, authorized the fire department through the building office to charge $8 per $1,000 of construction value. That did not start plan reviews. The fire department has always done plan reviews. What changed in 2016 is that we were finally charging a fee for it. And thank goodness, because we made a heck of a lot of money in fire plan review from the Amazon project, over $1 million, if I'm not mistaken. So when the fire chief was asked, why do we need consultants all of a sudden? And these were questions asked by both Mr. Hallahan and Mr. Monaco. Why do we need consultants when the fire chief or the fire marshal used to do this work themselves? The answer was, well, because starting in 2016, we have new work. The work is not new. I thought that was misleading. Again, what was new was that we were charging for the work. And Mr. Hallahan specifically asked, what percentage of that 150 is inspections, not to be confused with plan review. Inspections is where they go out to existing businesses, whether it's a package store, or a restaurant, or a retail store, and they inspect the premises to make sure that they're in compliance with fire and building codes, that the back door isn't being blocked by a file cabinet or a bunch of boxes or whatever. That's what the inspections are. They do not generate any income. Isn't that correct, Mr. Monaco?
Not that I know.
No, they do not. So what Mr. Hallahan asked, and I thought the chief agreed, was that he would break down the consultants, because he was asked what portion of that 150 is for the inspections of existing businesses, and what portion of that consultant's line item is being used to do the fire plan review. And Mr. Monaco responded that that was a reasonable request, but in the budget, it's not broken down. It's just a blanket 150 for consultants. And without it being broken down, I would cut that as well. And so last but not least, of course I saved the best for last, is whether or not we need additional firefighters. And if you look on the fire department portion of the town personnel, I think it's page 42, you'll see an increase of about $124,000, where you're going from 30 to 32. Right now, we have 30 in the budget because the 2 were just hired recently, December or January. So we're at 30. And if you look at the 32, which I believe the intention is for them to go in at half year, is that right? That's about $124,000 savings. I am against the hiring of any additional firefighters, and let me tell you why. First of all, the study group, after 7 months of extensive research, concluded that we only need 2 new firefighters. Two new firefighter paramedics. That's very important that they be paramedics as well. They recommended the daytime shift. I'm not pushing for that anymore. Unfortunately, I still believe, as you said you believed last month, Mr. Monaco, that was still the best way to go. I still believe it is too. They're not going to go for it. But you authorized 2, and that's all that they should get. And I agree with Mr. Hallahan when he said tonight that when the fire chief said that he's putting those 2 new guys on only one of the 4 shifts, so there'll be 10 on one shift and then 8, 8, and 8 on the other 3. I agree 100% with Mr. Hallahan when he said that we were pretty much boxed into a corner to hire 6 more. Tim said he's not totally convinced about the 6. I found that interesting because I'm certainly not. I don't want to give them any more. I think that 2 is enough. I would agree to giving them 2 more in this budget if the chief said that he was going to allocate one of the 2 new ones, right? We already gave them 2 new ones effective this January or whenever they were hired. If he said that he put 1 on one shift and 1 on the other to make it 9, 9, 8, and 8, I would agree to 2 more, making it 9, 9, 9, 9. That is, to me, a fair compromise. But that's not what he's doing. He's boxing us into a corner. And I agree with what Tim Daheny, my esteemed former colleague on the Board of Selectmen, did in fact say in September of 2018, paraphrasing him. He said, the Board of Finance must always question experts in this town, and we, the Board of Finance, must make the tough decisions. I understand that you want to rely on experts and all of that, but we or you as a Board of Finance, and when I was on the Board of Finance, we always questioned experts and denied them their requests based on need versus want versus affordability to the town. And so for that reason, I would, that would be a $124,000 savings. So the total is $817,000. I don't know what that equates. I think approximately $1/3 So, give or take? Yeah. So that is what I would propose to give the taxpayers a long and well-deserved break. And the reason why I think they deserve the break is because we've had very high surpluses. We missed an opportunity to reduce taxes in 17-18. And as the first selectman keeps warning us, the future, even though we have a very strong fiscal stability right now, and again, I commend him for his grand list growth, it is very possible that if any or some or a few of these proposals that we hear so much about in Hartford, whether it is unfunded mandates like the pension for teachers or the change in the car tax or the 1% mill rate tax that the state wants to impose, all these other horrible things we hear about and that the first selectman has been warning us about, I think that it is time for us to exercise some fiscal frugality and prepare for what might happen in the future. And so because we have a new governor who has lots of proposals, even if some of these proposals come true, our fiscal stability that we enjoy very well right now, will certainly be challenged. So let's start now in 1920, and let's cut some expenses and lower the mill rate, and give the taxpayers the break they deserve and prepare for the future. And that is my recommendation. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you. Anyone else? Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Make the motion.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.
The preceding program is brought to you in part through a grant from the town of North Haven. Watch town meetings or other videos on demand at nhtv.com.